right there a little too early. Clicked in the wrong place. All right, thank you, Liz. I'm Steve Wake. As you can see there from the slide, I'm a senior consultant with RevGen Partners, so formerly also work with Pragmatic Works, so I was thankful that Liz invited me when they were doing this Power BI month for the training on the T's that I could do a session again for my previous employer that I still support quite a bit. And also, as you can see there, I am president of the local SQL Server user group here in Denver. So if you're ever in the Denver area, make sure to look us up at denversql.org is our group, and we do lots of presentations on exactly these kind of topics, BI, database, all that kind of stuff. So in fact, we just had Devin Knight, who's the director of training there at Pragmatic Works here in town last couple weeks ago for our April meeting, and presented on Power BI as well. So we cover all these topics at our local group as well. So first thing with what is Power BI Designer, I kind of wanted to give a little bit of background, since it does look like, especially with the audience, there's a lot of people who maybe are brand new to Power BI and don't exactly know what it is, but just some background on kind of where it came from. So it's something that Microsoft has launched as a brand new business intelligence product line, is kind of what it's being branded as right now. It's aimed more at the end users and business users to try to bring reporting and analytics down to that kind of level. These are, some of you who've been around in maybe the Microsoft BI space for a while know that there have been quite a few attempts at this particular market with other items within the reporting services realm, report builder, etc. But this one is more aimed at that, because it turned out that the stuff they developed previously, Power Builder and stuff, really didn't cover as much of that, made it as easy for those users as it could be. So they needed something new that was in that realm to help with that. So that's kind of where Power BI came from. And the whole idea behind it is to create these really nice looking reports, dashboards, any of those type of information for those users, and to make them very, very easy to create. The idea that kind of one of the mantras they have with Power BI is 3 clicks to insight is one of the things that they live by. So the idea is that within 2 or 3 clicks of the mouse, you should be able to actually have a report up and running, is the idea with Power BI. And why is my slide not advancing? There we go. So just a little bit more background on the history of it. Some of you may recall the very early version of it was Power Pivot, was kind of the first thing as an Excel add-in. It actually first came out with what they were calling the Vertipack engine, which was the Columnar-based engine. I won't get into a lot of details on that because it's really not important to the technology, but that was the technology that they had acquired from another company and integrated it into this Excel add-on, which has since been renamed to XVelocity. So if you hear this XVelocity engine reference, that's kind of the basis for Power BI, is kind of where it started from within Power Pivot. And then the next big evolution of that was actually to take those models that were built using this XVelocity engine in Excel and be able to push them out to SQL Server Analysis Services, is what they called a tabular model when SQL Server 2012 came out, so that it became more of an IT-managed model. Along with that release, they came out with what they called the Microsoft BI semantic model, which was a way to unify both the tabular model and the analysis services multidimensional models together into a single way that they could think of them, so that you could, the idea was develop between multidimensional and tabular and not have a lot of differences between them. They still haven't fully gotten those two baked together, but it's getting there. I think within the next couple of years they should have it to the point where you won't know the difference between whether you're building multidimensional or tabular, that they should be pretty much the same. And then the next big release was Power View, which was kind of the reporting platform built on top of Power Pivot that actually took advantage of those Power Pivot tabular models and allowed you to build reports on top of them without having to use reporting services. So this was kind of the first of the end user reporting tools. Then they decided after those releases that they kept adding more of these Power tools that they would rebrand the whole thing to Power BI. And the big thing that was kind of interesting and funny about it to a certain extent was that they decided when they rebranded it Power BI that they added a space in there, because you'll notice above the Power Pivot and Power View don't have the space. Well, when they launched Power BI, they decided to put a space between all the product names. So the idea now is that all of the products all have Power as the first word and then space and then whatever the tool is that they call it, with the exception of Q&A. Is the one tool that's part of this umbrella but doesn't have Power in front of it for whatever reason. But anyway, that was kind of the funny thing that a lot of people made jokes about when they first did this, is they came out with all these cool Power tools and then they all of a sudden decided that they were going to put a space between them. So if you see people using them without the space, then technically it's incorrect, although Microsoft's own tools, as far as like the Power Pivot add-in for Excel that they've been updating, still has without the space. So I don't know when that's actually going to change, but it should change eventually. And then the next evolution was integrating all of the Power BI tools into SharePoint and Office 365. And when they did that, they also announced 3 new tools, which is Q&A, which I mentioned previously, which just stands for question and answer, which I'll actually get into when I do the demo and actually kind of show you what that is. It's kind of an interesting way to do analytics through asking questions of your data. And then you've got Power Query, which became a data acquisition and ETL tool built into the Power BI product line. So it's kind of a cool tool that we'll also see in the demo I'm going to do with Power BI with the Power Designer here in a second. And then Power Map was a separate one they launched as well that does really rich stuff with maps, where you can actually make even movies within it, so that you could kind of make a thing where the globe spins around and shows your data on it and stuff like that. That one is still the one that's kind of a big question mark that we'll get into a little bit later as well, as to where that one's going to fit in with the new setup with the designer and the new way that you're going to do everything on the web. That one's still kind of hanging out there as a question mark as to where it's going to be integrated into this future product. And then last is what launched here in December of last year, is this new Power BI preview. So previously, all that stuff above had lots of licensing requirements to actually even be able to use Power BI, which is what turned a lot of people off from using it, is that, as it mentions on that second to last bullet point, you had to have SharePoint. If you wanted all the full functionality, you pretty much had to have Office 365 as well. And then everything was done within Excel. So you're talking an Office license, an Office 365 license, and a SharePoint license in order to fully take advantage of all these Power BI tools previously. So with December, they decided to relaunch it completely from scratch in this preview program that's still going on, that kind of integrates all the products and doesn't require all this licensing. So we'll get into some of that licensing cost, at least what the current plans are here in a little bit as well. All right, so just have to put this up because all the stuff that comes after this is pretty much all part of what they're calling the Power BI preview. So it's all beta. This isn't released yet to the public fully. You can participate in the beta as part of the preview program, so I'll show you how you can take advantage of that, but just kind of putting this out there that, when I get into the demo, stuff may not work exactly the way I expect it to, and that's because a lot of the stuff that we're using is still in preview beta mode. So now we get into Power BI Designer. What is it? So this is a quote that I pulled out of the website, the PowerBI.com website, for what Microsoft calls Power BI Designer, and I went through and highlighted some of the things that I think are the big keys to what this tool is that I wanted to pull out. The big thing is that it's a dedicated report authoring tool, so the idea is that the Power BI Designer will be where you build Power BI reports, is the idea. The other thing that I didn't highlight that's worth mentioning there too is it says it's for the Power BI preview service. So The big thing that we'll get into with this as well with the new setup of Power BI is that the idea of Power BI is an actual service. It's an online service is the idea. It's not requiring SQL Server on the back end to run it. It's not requiring SharePoint, not requiring Office 365. It's going to be its own standalone service that's out there. So it's kind of going to be reporting as a service. You always hear this stuff of platform as a service, software as a service, which we'll actually mention a little bit later here with this tool as well. But this is kind of like analytics as a service or reporting as a service is kind of the idea where a lot of this stuff is going to live online. But then the other thing is, I mentioned before, is it does rich data transformations, visual analytics, unified seamless environment experience, which is important because as you saw with the previous slide with the history, there's been a whole bunch of these separate tools, separate add-ons to Excel. Now the idea is they're going to bring them all together into a single unified interface, which makes it a lot easier to use. And then the other thing is down at the bottom it's saying it empowers others and gives you timely critical insights on any device anywhere. Another important point about what they're doing with Power BI. Any device anywhere, so that brings in mobile is the big thing with that. So this product is being built from the ground up assuming use with mobile. And in fact a lot of the early preview versions of the apps actually are already up and running on iOS for the Apple devices. And then they also have a Windows 8 app that you can get off the Windows 8 store as well. So there's all that new stuff coming into play with touch and using mobile devices too that are built into this product. So just some other highlights. As it's been mentioned, it's kind of a standalone design, development, and rendering app with deployment to the service, which I'll show you is basically just a website, is how you can think of it. The preview version as it stands today, and it's constantly changing, includes 3 of the main tools that were part of the original Power BI, Power Query, Power Pivot, and Power View. But not all the features of each of these tools is fully integrated yet into Designer, so it's something that they're recoding, making sure that all this stuff works together right. So it wasn't as simple as just porting all this stuff over into this new Designer. They actually are rethinking how they're doing things with these tools and leveraging the best parts of each into the new Designer. And then the other thing I point out down at the bottom is the Designer, when you create the files, actually does create a brand new file type that we'll see as a PBIX is the file type. And it's just another, for those of you who have use the new Excel and Word files, it is still just an XML file in the background basically, thus the X at the end. But what it is actually like a zip container. So if you actually rename a .pbix to .zip, you can actually open it up and look at all the individual pieces that are part of that file. It's really a container is what it is, containing multiple files that make up the full solution of your Power BI Designer. So what can you access with Power BI Designer? So currently out of the box, I listed some of the things that are available that are the big ones, as you would expect as far as on-prem data sources. You've got SQL, of course, and Oracle, which have always been there as far as reporting within most of the SQL Server reporting services, SSIS type setup. So we've got those, and then you've got Teradata, you got MySQL, Postgres, SQL, and then you've got some Sybase, which was actually the original version of SQL way back when. Then you've got some newer stuff out there as well that they're supporting out of the box, which is APS, which is the new name for what PDW does, or Parallel Data Warehouse, for those of you that might be familiar with that tool. They rebranded that to the Analytics Platform, or APS. And then you've got DB2 databases, if you're using those on kind of a mainframe type environment. And then you got HDFS, which is the Hadoop file system. So it does support big data right out of the block with HDF support as well. And then the online data sources currently, really as far as online databases, they're supporting Azure, of course, since that's a Microsoft product. I would expect more of those sources to be supported. I wouldn't be surprised to actually see an Amazon service support in here. and any of the others, the big players that are out there. I would expect any of those kind of online databases to be supported down the road as well. And in some of the connectors for the software as a service that I mentioned, where they're online services that you can go and pull data in from, like Salesforce. If you're using Salesforce, that's built in out of the box. Google Analytics, I'll actually be able to show how that's built in to the product. I'll show you actually pulling some of the kind of sad analytics out of my personal blog site, but it's an interesting demo at least to show. I just don't have a site that has tons of traffic, unfortunately. But then we've got GitHub, Zendesk, and SAP, and then there's a lot more too. So if you go to PowerBI.com, you can get a lot more information on the other connectors, and they keep adding more as we go. Google Analytics is actually fairly new. That just came out with the March update, so they are adding more of these as they go through the preview program too. All right, so now I'll get in and actually show you the tools. First thing I'll show you is actually kind of going through what Power BI Designer is, actually launching the app and going in and looking at how that interface works, and then also the new preview.powerbi.com, which is currently just the preview version of what powerbi.com will eventually become, which is where you're going to be able to deploy your reports out to. So like I said, the idea behind this is that it's out in the cloud, basically, as far as where the analytics live if you want to share them with people. So this doesn't currently deploy out to any kind of internal SharePoint or anything like that. Whether that's coming, I don't know. They haven't made any of that public, but it's possible that I guess they could add some of that stuff into SharePoint. But the idea right now behind the product is that it will be deployed out to this powerbi.com website that Microsoft hosts. All right, so I will switch over to my desktop. Oh, there's a little preview there. And when you install it, so you go to, I guess I'll show that first. We'll go out to the main powerbi.com site. So if you just go out to powerbi.com right now, you'll get this opening page here, and then you just have to enter in an email address. They're saying a work email address, so it should be something that's under your work domain is kind of the idea, and then you can click the link to use it for free. You'll set up an account on powerbi.com and then be able to log into that account, and that's where you get access to the preview.powerbi.com to actually deploy all of your stuff out to, and I'll show you that in a little bit once we've gone through the actual app. But the other thing you can do is click download, and you don't actually even need to sign in to download Power BI Designer, but you can go and get the Power BI Designer app itself from this download link here. And then if you were curious about the iOS app, they have the link right here for that, or you can just go to the App Store on your iOS device and actually then download the Power BI app for that. I would expect that to increase in, that there'll be an Android version, and you would assume a Windows Phone version eventually. But at this point in time, they just have the iOS version up and running for Power BI. And then the other part that's here on downloads, just for those of you that do have on-site analysis services that you want to connect up, and this is, as it kind of points out here, I can't highlight it because you won't see it, but if you're using Tabular at this point in time, you can use this connector that would run on the server and make it so that you have access then to your Tabular on-site on-prem data within the Power BI service on the web. So that you may have to clear with your security personnel and stuff, and I definitely wouldn't recommend doing it on current production servers, of course, since this is in beta at this point. But once you've downloaded and installed the Power BI Designer, which currently only runs on Windows, I should point that out for those of you that are using Macs, the Designer is currently Windows only. You will get this icon here for Microsoft Power BI Designer on your desktop. So it's as easy as launching that. And like I said, this has been updated every month. Basically since December, there's been a monthly release, so it does get changed quite often. I am actually running the latest update, which actually came out 2 or 3 days ago. It just came out this week with the April update. So when I updated it before I was planning to do this presentation, I noticed a whole bunch of new stuff that was kind of like, oh, wow. So You'll get a notice. It doesn't update within the app, unfortunately, yet. What happens is it pops up a little pop-up down in the lower right-hand corner saying there's an update. You click that, it takes you to the link to basically back to the PowerBI.com site. You re-download it and just run it, and it will replace it, but it doesn't replace within the app itself. You do still have to go outside, click the link, re-download the executable, and then run the executable to install it. So I would expect that once this is further along, it will probably get to the point where they'll update within the app, which would be nice. But this is the startup page that launches. Pretty easy. You don't have very many choices here, as you can say. You can watch some videos if you want to get some idea on how stuff works, or you can just click on, if you just want to start pulling stuff. Like I said, the whole idea is 3 clicks or fewer to get something running. So if you actually want to go out and get something, you just click the Get Data. And then they bring you to this list, which they've already expected this list to be quite large. I'll zoom in a little bit here, just so you get an idea. So it gives you this long list of the sources if you're on the All option, but you can use these, the File, Database, Azure, or Other, to basically shorten that list down, or you can type up here in the search box to find the type of data connector that you're looking for. As you can see, it's a pretty rich set of options, along with your typical database type options that I listed off there on that slide. You've also got your Excel files, your CSVs, XML files, text files, and then the interesting one is actually folder. So if you actually have a folder full of files that you want to pull in and use analysis on, you can actually do that right out of the box. Typically that used to be an ETL type task that you would have to use SSIS or some other ETL tool to pull each of those files in and kind of do them through a loop. Power BI will handle that right out of the box, which is kind of cool. And if we scroll down, we've got some more other ones. These are some of the online Azure stuff. You've actually got support for the Azure Marketplace, so that's where there's free or paid data sets available for you to go out and get off the Marketplace. Or you've got the HD Insight, which is kind of the online version of Hadoop, basically, with some of that stuff set up automatically for you if you've got an HD Insight instance. You've got the other Azure Table Storage and Blob. You've got regular web, which I'll actually demo here in a second, which is your way to just go out to a website actually and pull data in, which is kind of interesting, and the type of stuff you can do with that. Then you've got your other fairly standard things like SharePoint lists. If you've got a SharePoint you're going to pull from. There's OData feeds, which actually just got updated in the April update up to version 4.0 of OData. So it should be up to date with everything new with the open data platform, getting data from those type of sources. You've got the HDFS that I mentioned for on-site Hadoop. You can actually go against your Active Directory or your Exchange server directly. Then you've got CRM Online. So notice right now it's just CRM Online. It's not all of Dynamics. It's only the one that's online at this point. I'm not sure what the plans are there for Dynamics connectors other than CRM. You've got Facebook built in, Google Analytics, as I mentioned, that I'll actually show you a completed setup for that I played with. And then you get into business objects, so you can actually connect to a business objects universe right out of the box. And you got Salesforce. Then for your more open connectors that aren't covered by any of these, you got ODBC out there, and then you can do just a blank query where you're actually just going to type everything in yourself if you want to pull data in. So this part, kind of the get data piece, is for those of you who have used Power Query previously. That's kind of where this is Power Query's integration into the new Power BI Designer. That's where this is coming from. So for this demo, I'll click the web and click Connect. Very simple box that comes up, just asks you for a web page URL. Just to do a real simple, quick little thing, I'm going to go out to this Wikipedia site that I found that has a list of the highest grossing movies of all time. And the important thing to note about how it's pulling data out of these sites, which you'll see when I actually put the URL in, is that it really looks for HTML tables. So anytime there's an actual table within a web page, it can pull each of those out as individual objects. So you see a lot of text in this page, but there's also a lot of different tables. There's probably like 6 or 8 different tables of lists here. So we're going to pull in just this top one is what I'm interested in, just this highest grossing films of all time. So all you got to do is grab the URL for the page. You don't have to worry about which piece of it. Switch back to Power BI. Paste that URL right in here. Click OK. Takes a little bit because it goes out and actually parses all the HTML, brings it into this navigator pane that popped up. And then as you can see, it went through, and actually there are a lot more tables than I actually said. There's 65 total tables apparently in this page. And then you can click on each one and it'll generate a preview over here on the right of the data that's in that particular table. This is that first table that I wanted to pull, but you can see here just as easily I can click on each of the others and see that it's pulling data from each of those too. So you can actually just select one or more. There is an option to just, there's checkboxes right here next to each of these tables. You just click these checkboxes if you wanted to pull in a whole bunch of them. For this particular scenario, I'll just click the one. And then down here in the bottom, this is more of the Power Query integration. You've got 2 options. You can just load it as is. That's what this button does. If you just click the load, it's just going to suck in that entire table exactly as you see in this preview. You can do edit, which actually allows you to go more into the true Power Query interface that existed before, where you're actually going to be able to remove columns, reformat the data type, split columns. All those type of scenarios are all supported within that. So that's actually what I'm going to click. Let's click the edit so you get kind of a better idea of how this designer works. So at this point, it looks very much like Excel, which if you used the Power Query, Power Pivot setup within the Excel add-ons today, this is exactly what you got with that setup, although we're not in Excel, now we're in a standalone app, which is kind of nice. Makes it a lot more stable to run it within its own app than to run it as an Excel add-on for those of you who have struggled with those issues, as I know I have, trying to use those tools, is that they sometimes would crash on you. So for what I'm going to do, the purposes of my particular analysis, I don't really need this peak column. So you can just select a column and say remove it, and then it just goes away from your use as far as in the model. So what's going on in the background, just so that you know, is that this is kind of Power Pivot and Power Query working together as they do today in the add-ons. It's building a Power Pivot model in the background that you can't actually see. And so what we're doing is we're changing the model based on what you're selecting as a source. So this reference column, I don't need that either, so I'm going to get rid of that. There are some formatting options. So one of the things I found as I was playing around with this is that it sees this year column as a number currently. So if you actually go into and look at it, it's actually thinking that this is actually a number, which it is, but that causes some interesting scenarios as far as how I want to use this data for my analysis. Right now they don't have the ability to actually change this to just a year. They have the option to convert it to a date. When you do that, it actually doesn't look right. So you'll notice when I change that to a date, it actually just tried to convert the year as it was into a full date, which is not right. So you can't actually use a date, unfortunately, for it. I would expect as time goes on they'll come up with more data type options that I could actually do that, or I could use some more complex DAX expressions. For those of you who don't know this, some of this stuff up here now is actually brand new with the April release, that they're actually allowing you to do full DAX within here. So if you know some really good DAX, you can actually come in here and start typing that in to actually transform it. In this particular scenario, just to keep it simple, I'm going to undo that change. So the other thing you'll notice that's going on over here on the right is it's actually keeping track of all the steps that I do within this particular query. So where I got it from, what I chose in that navigation as far as what table I selected off the source. It did some detection of the types of columns and actually went in and changed them automatically. That step was done automatically. This is where I removed those 2 columns, and then this is where I just recently just changed that type to date. So if you want to configure any of these individual steps, if they've got the little the gear icon next to them, you can actually come in and click that and get some more advanced stuff where this brings back up that selection box to say, okay, which table did you really mean to pull if you accidentally selected the wrong one. And then you can actually remove steps. So in this case, I don't want it converting that date like I did, so I can just click the X and it's gone. The idea behind this is that this is, for those of you who haven't used Power Query, this is the M language that you may have heard of, mentioned. It's actually building M in the background, and if you are familiar with M, you can actually come to the View tab, go into the Advanced Editor, and then bring up this box that actually shows you the M language. So if you've been curious about how M works and stuff, that's exactly what this is that it's actually building out M in the background. The idea is that you shouldn't have to use this if you're a typical business user, but if you are a little bit more of a power user and know how to code in M, you could actually write your own steps and stuff like that to actually manipulate this. So you do have full access to that, just like I said, by clicking the View menu and going into the Advanced Editor allows you to actually manipulate this a little bit more. So for my purposes, I want to use this year, and so I'm as analysis, not as a measure, because when it's flagged as a number, it thinks of that as a measure, not something that you can actually use as like a dimension to do analysis on a slicer. So I'm going to change it to text, is what I'm going to actually change it to just for this demo to make that work. Then you could go in and actually change these column names if you wanted to actually call them something else. Gross isn't a great column name, but just to show you the demo of how that kind of works, you can fully rename that. They don't currently have a currency type. I would expect that to be added eventually as well. So right now I can't actually change this gross column into a currency. That is something I can format within the reports that I build once we get to that point. So the other thing I'm going to do is change the name of the actual query itself of this table and just make it a little bit nicer to read. As grossing films is what I'll call it. So that just makes it nicer to read. The thing to keep in mind is everything that you see here is visible to the users, so you probably want to make these columns look really nice. I've played around with pulling data out of other websites, and sometimes the column names don't come in right. They look really ugly because they have some kind of HTML code and stuff on them, so it's really important to make sure you come in here and make it look nice so that when they view it in a report, they'll actually see stuff that they understand as well. And you can, if you pull in data and recognize that it's not detecting the first layer as the actual titles for the columns correctly, there's an option up here at the top called Use First Row as Headers. You click that, and that would automatically replace what it has as the headers with that first row of data. So there's all kinds of transformations up here that you can use with the data. And then there's even more if you go to the transform column where you can actually get into doing rounding and trigonometry and all kinds of good stuff. Let's see here, maybe nope, they didn't add it. So I was checking the format because, like I said, they update this constantly, so it becomes an issue with kind of gumming through here and actually figuring out what all options they've added with the new versions. So sometimes I always have to check and make sure, maybe they added a currency capability, but not currently that I see. So there's lots of powerful stuff you can do here. Like I said, you can split columns, you can merge columns together, you can append queries, as you can see here, or merge queries where you have multiple data sets. You can actually pull them together to make them a single data set. You can pull data in from multiple different sources. So like this one I pulled from the web. If I had something in my SQL database, like a date dimension or something that I actually wanted to load into this to merge them together to make it a fully working model, I could very easily. That's all built right into this tool to allow you to pull in as many different queries as you want from as many different sources and put them all together and make it something that works together. So as you'll notice, mentioning that kind of merging stuff together, there's nothing in here currently for setting up those relationships, and that's something I'll show you here in a second that just got added with the April update to actually allow you to do some of that kind of stuff once you get into the reporting area. So down here at the bottom left, you may have noticed I'm sitting on query currently, which is why it's highlighted in green. There's also this option for reports. So this is kind of how you switch between the two views of the way you're doing things. So I've got that query working. It looks good, so I'll click report. And when you click report, it goes out, and then that's where it actually starts pulling in this actual data from that website. So you still need access to that web data. Now it's actually going to pull it all in. And now it actually built a model. So for those of you that are familiar with doing pivot, tables and stuff within Excel, this is a very familiar interface. It's almost exactly the same as those setups, where you've got the sigma sign showing you what your measures are, so your numerical values that you can do analysis on, and then your regular values that were also part of that table. I only had the 4 columns available to me, but you can see how those are shown there. And then building a report is as simple as clicking on what you want to see, and then you'll notice what it automatically did when I did that is it selected this rank measure. So whenever you select an item that you're going to do the report on, it's going to try to automatically select what it thinks might be the measure you want to use. But if that's not the measure you want to use, it's just as easy as unclicking and clicking the other measure. So in this case, it automatically built out a bar chart that shows you all of the movies, kind of a big list to look at this way, but kind of get the idea where you can kind of scroll through the list and see in alphabetical order which movies made how much money. So it's pretty easy to tell from that analysis there that Avatar is, of course, the highest grossing at this point in time. Not sure where Avengers is. I would have expected Avengers to be in that list, but not sure why, unless it's over in another title. They like to take the formal titles, so if you don't see something you're expecting, which no, I don't see Avengers in here at all, which is kind of interesting. But anyway, aside from that, this is kind of how that works. Now the cool thing, oh actually there it is, the Avengers. I'm just blind because it's got the first. So the cool thing is you got these charts. You can play around with the chart. You can click on this and make it into a that kind of a chart if you want to see it more in a different format. You can actually then say I want to have a different item next to it. So what you can actually do is once you're inside of this, you're changing that current item within your report. If you want to create another analysis to look at, you just click outside of it. Maybe I go and I want to see the gross by year, the gross amounts by year. So then this did that same kind of analysis, but now we're doing it by year. If I change it to the same format, now we see that 2012 was the highest year in total gross of these movies. Keep in mind that it's total gross of these highest grossing. It's not total gross of all movies for that year, but once you keep that in mind, that's kind of how that works. So the idea of the reports in this is kind of what PowerView was. For those of you who've used PowerView, is kind of this quick click type scenario and build out these really quick little analysis pieces in these different formats. So you've got a lot of choices here. You can do gauges now. You can do all kinds of different charts. You can do maps. There's no geographic data in here, so maps don't do any good, but you get the idea that that's kind of what it is. And then the idea is once you're done with the report and you're ready to share it, and actually real quick before I mention that, there are some options up here if you wanted to have a multi-page report with a whole bunch of analytics spread across different pages. You can just click that to add a new page. And then the other thing I mentioned with DAX and Power Pivot is this new measure item. This allows you to create new measures within the report. It's important to clarify that these are not the calculated measures. If you are familiar with Power Pivot and have used it, you have the ability to create calculated measures within the Power Pivot model. These are not that. These are just measures within the report itself. I would assume that since this is kind of the first showing of this, that eventually there'll be the capability within what we saw in the query option to also do calculated measures. They just haven't gotten there yet. So I would assume this is, like I said, it's evolving as we go. And then the other thing, if I had multiple tables, is this Manage Relationships option up here would actually be visible to be clicked on, and then I could actually go in and say how tables are linked to each other, what are the values, the foreign key type relationships. It'll do its best to auto-detect those relationships like Power Query used to do as well, but you can actually go in and manually manage those relationships as well. That's just not lit up because I only have a single query, so there's nothing there to do that with. But if you're a little bit more of a power user and understand how your data is related to each other and the auto settings aren't working, that's the option you would use to manage that yourself. All right, so back to, you got this all set up, you're ready to share it with everybody. You can do multiple different ways of doing that. If everybody has the Power Query or Power BI Designer, you could just share the PBIX files and everybody could look at them that way. So that's the first option here, is it's just going to save this. So I'll just save this as top grossing movies. Oh, if I could type. And like I said, it's going to save it in that PBIX format, which is just a container. So now that's just saved locally, so you could email that as an attachment. But what Microsoft is really wanting people to do with it is to go to the new preview.powerbi.com. I'm having trouble speaking with the lines. And this is where that sign-in comes into play. So you do have to sign into the account that you create within that site. And then it loads up a site that kind of looks like, for those of you that have been doing some of the Power BI within SharePoint type setup, that's kind of what this is, but this is not SharePoint, so it's important to differentiate that this does not require SharePoint. This is its own site that comes with the licensing that's built in that we'll talk about here in a minute. As you can see, I have some default stuff. When you first create your own, what I recommend is you click this Get Data on the Power BI site, and if you scroll down, there's this built-in retail analysis sample that you can click on. Anybody who has set up an account can do that. Click Connect, and what that does is that will actually add these retail analysis samples. If you have one set up already, you'll have a shared version of this this dashboard on there, and you'll notice that it's shared because it has a little people icon here. I have since removed that from mine to help make this a little bit less cluttered. But when you actually do the get data and connect to it, it'll actually give you both the dashboard, the reports that are associated with that, and the data set. So basically it's taking a pre-built PBIX file and then installing that into your environment. So as you can see, I have that sample set up. I actually have a dashboard here. This is what I was talking about with the Google Analytics setup. This was actually as simple as just a couple clicks to get set up, because they have these, the other piece that's part of the Power BI site is what they're calling content packs, where they're going to have these kind of pre-designed dashboards and reports that you can get off of these software as a service type services. So I would expect a Facebook one to show up where you can kind of see some of the stuff off Facebook. This was the only one that I could currently get working in the current preview, but I just had to click, and log into my Google Analytics site for my actual site, and then it pulled up this really cool, dashboard that was pre-built. I can also go into the actual reports that are the basis for those dashboards, see a little bit more detailed information. The idea is that for that dashboard, you can actually come in here into the reports section and click these little pins, and that will add it to that dashboard. So you could build multiple of these dashboards based on individual reports or multiple reports, and build these kind of dashboards that are the combination of multiple items from each of these reports. So each of these little items here are actually little dashboard pieces that you can add, and these were all built using that same Power BI designer that we saw. And as you'll see, they all interact with each other. So as I click on items within a chart, it actually changes all of the charts. So that's kind of an interesting thing. And if you click on anything that's not an actual measure, it resets it back to the full version unfiltered. And you can navigate to the pages for the reports. So there's some maps there that actually show you, in my particular case, where most of my users are coming from. You can zoom in on that map, of course, do stuff like that. And again, click on anything, it changes all of these different items on that page. So it's kind of cool how that's all integrated. And you click there to go back. You can look at the data sets. I have some other reports where I was playing around with pulling some Formula One data off of the Formula One website that just kind of shows with the 2015 races what's going on. You got some cool interactions where I can show Lewis Hamilton's the driver for the Mercedes team. This shows the percentage of his points to the whole team's points, and it shows on the map that he's from Great Britain. So there's some kind of cool analytics you can do there that were very easy to build based on that. But if we want to add what I just built, you just click the Get Data, click Power BI Designer File, connect, we'll browse out to that top grossing movies, you click Open and Connect, and then that will upload all of that stuff we built, which in this case was just a new data set. So you can kind of play around with the data set in here. As you can tell, you can do some work on the data set actually here within the designer site, which is kind of cool, within the website. And then you can actually then, of course, look at the reports, and that's where I can come in here and say, hey, I'd like to pin this to a dashboard. So then it pins that new gross by title out to one of the whatever dashboard was selected. I'm not sure what, it probably just added it. It just added it to this dashboard, so you'd have to make sure you add a new dashboard first and make that the one that you're currently looking at, and that's the dashboard it pins those items to. So that's kind of the one thing you got to look at when you're doing that. And you'll notice there I clicked on the, within the dashboard, I clicked on the individual item, and that will take it automatically to the report the report page that item came from within the Power BI site. So kind of cool linking and stuff, and like I said, as you can see here, the dashboards can be intermingled between all kinds of different items. You can come in here and then say, I don't want to see that on my dashboard anymore, and delete it, etc. And then there's the Q&A, which I won't have a lot of time to demo here, so I got a few more things to cover in slides, but you can just ask simple text questions. What year did we have the most sales? That may not work, actually. Yeah, sometimes you got to be, you can't type great things, although it did give us a count, so I guess it did answer my question. It said that in fiscal year 2014 we had this many different sales, so it did actually answer it. But then if I wanted to show it as a chart, it's not going to do it for a single year because I told it to tell me the most sales. So you can say, like it was saying, you could have it sorted, descending in chart. Oh, chart's not going to work. So there's keywords that you and it kind of does help you below. It was kind of showing me some stuff that I could have had in there to make it work better. But there you can kind of see, I don't know, it's showing whatever DM is, but this is Q&A is what that is. It's based on the model in the background. Currently you can't, for those of you who have done stuff with Q&A, there's the capability within Power Pivot to do what they call semantic or synonyms, to edit those to make it so that when people type certain keywords, it knows what that means in your model. You can't currently edit those within this particular setup, but I would assume that's a feature that will come later on with the Power BI Designer. So that was kind of the quick breeze through of that, and we looked at both the designer and the new website. Just some real quick stuff on where I think this is going, except that my Power View, my slides are not cooperating. Give me a second here. Should switch over. There we go. So just some of the future things that I see coming. The ones that are the solid lines we already know are included. These are things they've said are coming. There's going to be the Power BI service will be in a free and a pro version, which I'll show you the licensing on in just a second. We know that it's going to be using HTML5 as it is in this preview instead of the Silverlight controls that it was using previously with Power View. So that's why we can get to the cross-platform and browser support, is that they're moving away from Silverlight. They are going to add Active Directory security integration, so you'll be able to use that to do row-level security on the models. That's definitely something that's coming. As far as where Power Map and Q&A are going to fit, Q&A is an easy one. As you can see, it was already kind of there. I would expect the synonyms capability to be added in. Power Map, not sure about, because that one requires quite a bit of graphics power, so it's kind of a question mark if we'll be able to do all the features of Power Map. You can do reports with maps, just the real basic kind of stuff of filling in an area of a map or putting dots on a map or charts, stuff like that. You could do currently with it. Just the full features of what's in Power Map today, I don't know if those are going to make it. I would expect them to add a lot more software as a service connectors to this. I would expect to see a Twitter one for one. I was surprised Twitter wasn't there, but Facebook is. They're moving towards, as you can tell, pulling Power BI out of Excel and SharePoint. Whether that means that the tools they've been developing for those are going to go away or no longer supported, I don't know at this point. They haven't announced. My expectation would be that they are going to push everybody towards this the Power BI Designer and not support those going forward is kind of the idea. I could see SharePoint integration for kind of an on-prem version of the Power BI website type stuff, or some kind of integration with it. I could definitely see that coming. And then as far as what this means for like reporting services and all the other tools in 2016 that'll be coming out later this year probably, I don't know that either. They've been pretty quiet about what's coming in SQL Server 2016, but it would be cool to see a lot of these new visualization capabilities built into reporting services. Whether that's going to happen is kind of unknown. This might be a little hard to read off of here, but I will post these slides so that you all can read them. This is currently what they have said the pricing is going to be. Very simple, 2 models, free or pro. Free has some limitations as far as how much you can upload per user, but you got the full functionality of connecting to most of the software as a service, doing the authoring, uploading to the site, that kind of stuff all works with the free version, so it's going to be a very nice, and they can look at all the stuff you designed. So the way I see this working out is that the pro license is per user per month. I would expect that to be more of your people who are going to build a lot of these kind of analysis type things, and then your regular people who are just going to view the analytics and maybe interact with them a little bit, they can be on the free side is what I would expect. So you'll have far fewer people in the pro side than on the free side in most companies. And then that pro side gets you the capability to do, more often refreshing, more rows being pulled back from those data sources, and then the actual ability to actually set up the gateway that allows you to connect to your on-prem sources of data as well directly from that powerbi.com website or the stuff there. So that's kind of how the pricing is set up today within this scenario, and it's pretty exciting because that's, with that free option, that opens us way up as far as licensing compared to what it is today. So just kind of a summary of what we went through, kind of breezed through some of the stuff, but just want to give you a good idea. It wasn't meant to be a full deep dive into the designer, but gives you an idea of where we're going as well with the product, and then you saw the pricing as well. So we'll take some questions if Liz has some, and then here's your action list for what I would expect you to do based on this, is just to go out to that powerbi.com site, get yourself a free preview account and start playing, because as you can see, it was pretty easy to play with. Doesn't require a ton of setup and knowledge, but it is there for anyone to use at this point.
Okay, great. Well, let me start. We have a lot of questions. Let me go ahead and get started.
Okay.
Any suggestions on how to connect with cubes efficiently?
How to connect with cubes. So multi-dimensional cubes currently not supported at all in Power BI Designer. I would expect that to change as we get closer to release, but right now they only support tabular. And like I said, you have to use that analysis services connector that was linked to the PowerBI.com website. They have not said publicly what they're doing with multidimensional, but I do know tabular is, of course, supported right out of the box right now using that connector. But I would expect multidimensional to come. It may require SQL Server 2016. There may be something coming in the way they're going to do 2016 that may require that, though I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay. How do I sell management on the security of using PowerBI.com because we're in healthcare and deal with patient info?
Right, yeah, exactly. And I expect some more stuff when we get closer to release to come out on that one too. Like I said, they're going to do the the Active Directory integration into the model so that you can do row level type security. But if the security is a real concern, I can see already that the idea is that you use those on-prem connectors to keep your data on premises, and then just the analytics themselves are what's shown on the website. But then I would expect something where it could be rolled into your own website internally or into SharePoint hopefully as well for those type of scenarios. It just may not come version 1. I wouldn't be surprised if that's a down the line version 2.0 type scenario.
Okay. Power BI Designer is in 64-bit from the Power BI site. Are there 32-bit? Does 32-bit exist?
I don't think so. I think that what they have said is that they expect that most people are on 64-bit machines at this point, so that they will only support 64-bit because that gives the best capabilities of being able to access the most data and use the memory appropriately on computers that most people have nowadays. So they have said that they probably will not support 32-bit at this point in time. It's just going to be 64-bit.
Okay. Can you use multiple data sources in the same project?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, the what I was showing as far as in the query part, you can just keep adding queries. So you just keep going in there and doing get data, and they can be from all different sources. So you could have 30 queries that come from 30 totally different, web pages, or a mixture of web pages and SQL Server, whatever combinations you need.
Okay. What is the difference between Power Query and BI Designer? Any best practices on usage?
Well, Designer is, because it is still in flight in beta, includes some of the code from Power Query. So as far as if you're thinking of I'm building stuff currently in Power Query and I want it to work with the Power BI Designer, as long as you're building tabular models in the background, which you are with Power Query and Power Pivot, those they have said should all be able to move into Power BI Designer without any issues. So you should be able to fully use all those without any issues.
Okay. How do I check repeated columns in each row?
Repeated columns in each row. Not quite sure I understand fully that question, but if you're worried about duplicate data, there are some transformations in that query option to look for duplicates and actually remove them out of the data. I haven't played with that too much, but I know it does have that capability.
Okay. Can you import web data and then after making the changes upload to your own SQL Server?
Yeah, I mean, well, out of the box right now in Designer, no. You could probably do some fumbling around because, like I said, the PBIX file is a container, and so it should contain a tabular model in there, whether you could find a way currently in the beta to suck out that tabular model and pull it into Excel or into the tabular instance and analysis services. I'm not sure. I haven't really played around with it like that, but I would expect something to come out of the full release since it is building the same tabular model in the background that you can build with Power Pivot today, that you could pull that out of the Power BI Designer file and push it out to your analysis services server if you need to.
Okay. If data from a website changes, is the data in the dashboard refreshed?
So yeah, if you go in, and it kind of depends on those tiers, the free or the pro model is the idea behind the refreshing. They're going to tie how often you can refresh to those levels. With the free version, you can refresh once a day the data, so you could actually tell it to go pull the latest data off the web page, assuming the web page format hasn't changed, of course, in that time. And it will update all the reports and everything that are tied to that particular website. And then if you go to the pro level, you're allowed to do hourly refreshes, so you could actually set it up to refresh more frequently with the pro version.
Okay. Someone wants to know if they can, is there anywhere they can subscribe to be informed on the changes of Power BI?
What I do is I have subscribed to the RSS feed for the blog within the Microsoft MSDN site. There is a Power BI blog, and its name is escaping me right now. If you search for like Microsoft Business Intelligence or something, they have a blog within the MSDN umbrella that they have been posting all the updates on this. So like there was a post 2 or 3 days ago for the April updates they put up there, but that's how I keep in touch with that. Or on Twitter too. I think there's a Power BI Twitter account Microsoft has that they let you know updates as well.
Okay, we'll do one more question. Can the Power BI charts be imported into SharePoint web parts?
Not currently. I would expect, like I said, something to occur within some integration into SharePoint. Right now you can see that there was SharePoint lists as a capability to bring in that data, so we know there is that connection still there as far as pushing it back out or making it available. I think there is somebody who's done some stuff online with the preview stuff, if you search for it, where you could actually, because it just lives on a site, they make a container within SharePoint to actually point to that Power BI site. But as far as being able to pull out the individual pieces and parts off of the reports and the dashboards, you can't do that currently.
Okay. Well, we're out of time. For the questions that I didn't get to, I can send them to Steve, and we can probably post them on a blog on his site as well as the Pragmatic Works site. So to stay informed on when those are posted, make sure to especially follow us on Twitter at Pragmatic Works. That's the best way to kind of keep up to date with all the new updates to free training and anything else. If you have any questions in the meantime, Steve's contact information is up there, or you can email me directly. lhamilton@pragmaticworks.com. That's what's tied to all your GoToWebinar stuff. We thank you guys for joining us today, and we hope to see you guys soon.
Thank you.